Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Michael Kitces back on the show to help me with this mailbag episode. In these episodes, we reach into our virtual bag of mail and answer questions from listeners regarding a range of topics. Despite our best efforts to get through a lot more questions today, we were actually only able to answer 4 of them. We started off with the discussion around the differences between prospecting and marketing and what makes sense for your business. Next, we talk about service models for planning firms with our recommendations for meeting structure frequency and topics for each agenda. Next, we gave our recommendations for educational programs, books, and resources for becoming a true financial planner and business owner. We closed out with a discussion about E&O insurance, when you need to obtain it, and what to look for when you do. This month's podcasts are brought to you by Financial Media Exchange, the world's largest content library built exclusively for the financial planning industry, with content from industry experts like Morningstar, Kiplinger, and former Fed economists. FMX brings financial advisors thousands upon thousands of pieces of unique content that is timely, relevant, and can be personalized. And financial advisors need to know that over 70% of their clients say content marketing makes them feel closer to their advisor. FMX publishes new content every day, offers 12 different newsletters, and enables financial advisors to quickly send branded content from their phone, desktop, or tablet to where clients want. Email, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, websites, blogs, and daily newsletters. I can tell you firsthand that FMX offers a great experience for the financial advisor and a better experience for the financial advisor's client. You can learn more at www.fmexdirect.com. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/101. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is my mailbag episode with Kitces. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on.
It's good to be back. I think it's been a little while. I fear we have a large backlog of mail to answer in these mailbag episodes. Is there like 2 bulging mailbags of letters that have come in of things for us to respond to now?
There really are. It's looking like Santa's sack right now. No, so it's been a while because, we used to do these monthly, and we didn't get as many questions as monthly would necessitate. And so we sort of backed off, and then conference season always happens because I think we just got back from the NAPA conference. So I think that was like your 4th week of 4 conferences a week. So I don't know if it probably have 2 more weeks of that and then things will calm down.
Yes. I'm looking forward to getting through the crazy travel season here.
So we are squeezing this in on the weekend, which is awesome. So we will just dive right in because, to your point, we have a lot of questions to get through. So we'll see how far we can get. Hopefully more than 5 because that is our average and our max and our median because we always do 5. And hopefully we do more.
So we will try to be above average today.
We're going to go above average if we can. So number 1 is more of a statement than a question, but I think it's definitely something worth chatting about. And it's about this concept of prospecting versus marketing. And so the comment was, frankly, I don't think you guys pay nearly enough attention to the scale of prospecting for new businesses. You talk a lot about marketing, niches, getting referrals, and so on, but not so much about coming out of the gate hard as a new RIA with 0 clients. And I think this is a very interesting question. So what I had to do was, 1, I went and just sort of Googled around for definitions of prospecting versus marketing so that we can be sure we're sort of speaking the same language. So I'll tell you what I found, and you can tell me if you agree with this, and then if so, then we'll talk about it. So one definition I found was, the goal of marketing is to attract targeted customers that are interested in your product or service, while prospecting is meant to chase people that may or may not be interested in what you're having to offer. So this is sort of the inbound versus outbound. I found the second piece of this definition says, as a prospector, you become the hunter, whereas marketing is where you become the hunted. Now, these are not the cleanest definitions, and we could argue about semantics here, but in general, do you agree with sort of that framing of like prospecting is outbound, marketing is inbound type definitions?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's a caveat, which is there are forms of outbound marketing, there are forms of inbound marketing. So the marketing kind of runs to varying degrees as to how inbound it really is or not. But yeah, the core of prospecting is, literally, you're going out to find prospects. The early days of the industry, that was cold calling. Before that, I still know advisors who literally built their business doing door-to-door prospecting, usually like small-scale life insurance policies and stuff. They get right in between the encyclopedia sales and the vacuum cleaner sales that were also commonly door-to-door in the 50s and 60s. Whereas the nature of marketing is, I'm trying to build some kind of presence where people are interested in me. So there's kind of the outbound marketing. Let's do advertising. Now, even at the end of the day, if ads work, someone calls me. So it's kind of it starts outbound, but eventually the people call. And then there's other forms of more purely inbound marketing. So blogging and content marketing, things like that, where the whole point is I just want to create a steady stream of people that are calling me so that I don't have to go out and prospect and, pull people off the street one at a time to try to get business.
Yeah. And it's a very fair question that we focus more on marketing than prospecting. And I think the reason is because this show is hosted by two introverts who the thought of going out and prospecting makes me want to vomit. And if that is the only way that we were growing our businesses, I would not be in this business. I would be doing something else. I think prospecting is something that as an introvert, I could absolutely learn how to do if I was dependent upon it. But I have personally, and you have personally, found ways to focus on areas that we actually enjoy and I think are good at versus trying to sort of force something that doesn't necessarily come natural to us. But we do sometimes talk about social media marketing and blogging and things like that. And I think sometimes that is interpreted as go put a few blog posts up, tweet occasionally, and just wait for the phone to ring. And I am absolutely not an advocate of that. That is not the way that you get your business running and actually get started. When you're first starting your business, 80 or 90% of your time should be spent in this marketing and prospecting realm. That this is not just, if you build it, customers will just show up and beg you to take $200 a month from them for financial planning services. That is just absolutely not the way it works. So I don't think this should be interpreted as that marketing is sort of the lazy business owner's game and prospecting is the gung-ho, going to take on the world game. It's more of, in many ways, what's your brand? What's your niche? Who are you actually targeting? I think of a world where the Edward Jones guy, because they're the door-to-door guys that I still know, will show up and say, "Oh, you just lost your job. I'm so sorry. Do you need help rolling over your 401k?" That's a fantastic way to get in with those folks in a small community, is just go knock on doors. Whereas if you are the advisor that works with missionaries that are overseas, prospecting may not be the best methodology for getting your niche market.
Or at least it's going to look different if that's who you're trying to reach. Do they periodically come home for events? And when they're home, can you sponsor that event? And that'll be your prospecting event, but you only get a couple because missionaries only come back so often.
Yeah, so it is an interesting piece that I think you have to find, one, who's your niche market, of course. We're starting the drinking game very early in this episode. So, who is that ideal client and where are they, going to find you? But also what's your comfort level? And what are you good at? I've joked before. I got invited out to a speaking engagement one time to this group of young planners that are interested in starting their own practice. Okay, can you imagine a group of 30 people more ideal for what we do than 30 young planners saying, "We want to start our own business. Would you come speak to us?" Do you know that I walked out of there without a single person's contact information? 30 people that are just like, perfect. And I don't have a single piece of contact information because that makes me so severely uncomfortable to actually just collect that information and talk to people in that manner. I have joked that you could drop me into a room of prospects and I wouldn't get a single client. And I proved it in that instance because it's just not natural for me. But there are other ways of marketing that are more natural because they knew me to bring me in for that speaking engagement.
Let's say, yet you built Serenity and brought in clients who were paying you ongoing financial planning fees for services.
Yeah. But I did that in a way that I always found that, frequent listeners will have heard me say this many times before, but I always found it was much easier to get clients or sign on clients that were interested or looking for a fee-only financial planner than to try to convince people that they needed help with their personal finances. I found the latter a very long play, and it took a very long time to try to get those folks to understand, sort of the stages of change, to get them from pre-contemplation to contemplation and all the way through, as opposed to like, we're looking for a financial planner and you're a financial planner. So that was really where I wanted to hang out. It took a lot of work in active marketing to be findable once somebody said, I want to be a financial planner. And so they searched and found me. It was just different than going, in a more active role of looking for clients.
I mean, there's a second piece to this question or statement that I think is worth acknowledging as well, because I hear versions of this from time to time as well. And it's usually something to the effect of, Alan and Michael talk a lot about these long-term strategies of finding your niche and building your niche, but I'm getting my business going now, and like, I need some clients now. I can't wait. So what are the things to get clients now? And like, just to be clear about this, there's no magic like, oh, there's this other strategy that just gives you tens of thousands of dollars of revenue from dozens of clients in year one, but we're not going to tell you about it because we think you should build a long-term focused marketing strategy. Like, there is no secret, if you just do this, all the clients suddenly show up regardless of whether you have a niche or a focus. The whole point of why we talk about this is because your only alternative is, I'm going to start cold calling. I'm going to start, just throwing my stuff out there in seminars, in outbound advertising, and other things that frankly tend to be both time intensive and cost intensive and have ever worse results. Like, I mean, if you really want to do prospecting, the good old fashioned way, like, grab a phone, buy some lists, make sure they're clean lists that aren't on the do not call, and start cold calling, and you can prospect. And I guarantee you, if you call enough people, you will find some business, but you have to flake like 98% rejection rates in the process, and you're going to spend a lot of dollars, and it may not be the best business that you get at the end, because not many people are just sitting around in their house waiting for the phone to ring to be like, oh my God, I was so thinking about doing a comprehensive financial planner for an ongoing relationship. And lo and behold, one called me out of the clear blue sky the day I was thinking about it. Like, that doesn't happen very much. Even the people who sold historically through aggressive outbound prospecting tended to sell products, right? I can knock on doors to sell a vacuum cleaner or an encyclopedia or a life insurance policy. It's a lot harder to knock on doors to sell personal financial planning advice from a trusted expert, not the least of which because we tend to look askew at people who knock on our door or do equivalent style prospecting things. And it's not exactly the kind of relationship that sets up for ongoing trust for comprehensive financial planning. And so just beware, like, it's not as though we're holding out the super secret strategies that get you lots and lots of clients out of the gate from the start. There is no magic solution on that end. What you're facing instead is you can do the really hard grinding prospecting process for the next several years, or which is going to be painful every year, or you can start laying the groundwork for having a niche, having a specialized service, being differentiated, and having an inbound marketing strategy, which means, frankly, it's not going to be any easier in year one, but it's going to get easier in year two, and it's going to get a lot easier in year three, and it's going to get way easier beyond that. And the difference is where you get to after several years, not that either of them really just makes business rein in on year one, because it takes time to be known and liked and trusted for people to want to pay you an ongoing fee for comprehensive advice services.
Yeah, the final part of this comment about, focusing, speaking to advisors that are starting a new RIA with zero clients and coming out of the gate hard. And I will tell you that is an extremely, extremely tough road. I do not want anyone to ever listen to this show and think like, oh, Alan and Michael are basically telling me that if I just quit my job and go open up an RIA, the clients will flood in and I'll easily be successful. I mean, that is not the case. I did that because I got fired. If you haven't listened to my story, you can go back to episode 50 and listen to my story. And I did this fresh out of the gate with zero clients. And I will tell you, it was a slog. I got very, very lucky that I found some folks that were willing and able and did actually refer prospective clients to me, because if they hadn't, I would not have made it more than 6 months. When we started XY Planning Network, sometimes you just get lucky. And, but we didn't start XYPN until I looked back at my calendar and realized I'd had over 100 phone calls with young planners that were asking questions about starting their own practice. Michael, you had a ton of questions coming in through the blog and conversations at conferences and things like that. So when we got started, we sort of already had this initial email list of people that were like, we have 0 clients, but we think we have a model that will help these people. And when we launched, we were fortunate enough that 30 of those folks showed up as our founding member class. But it wasn't like we just came out and said, okay, we have this new business idea. Let's go see who's interested. We sort of already had a foundation of folks to target. And I think that that's what's so important and so hard to balance when you have a full-time job, or if you're working in financial planning, to be building a separate list so that you can go out and start your own practice is very difficult. But you can be building awareness and influence and relationships with the folks that you think will refer clients to you, with other advisors, with folks in your niche, just sort of depending on where your focus is. There's a lot you can be doing to lay the foundation so that you don't truly feel like you're opening up and have 0 clients and then have to just figure it out, that you sort of have a game plan for how you're going to get that first wave of clients.
Beyond that, to be fair, to go back to the original question, for people that are trying to figure this out and want to come out of the gate hard, there are options out there. It's frankly not much that's really new, particularly if you haven't picked some kind of specialization or niche you're going to market or go after. So, there's the networking path. So you can join groups like your local estate planning council or a young professionals organization or BNI, which is a business networking group. So you can join networking groups and you can go and be the financial planner and say, I do comprehensive financial planning for Gen X and Gen Y clients. And if you know anybody who's young who wants financial planning advice, you can try to start networking, get known in that space. There are people that come out of the gate hard doing things like seminar marketing. Frankly, it was the very popular strategy of the 1990s, which should probably say something about its relative likely viability now. But you can come out of the gate doing seminars. There are companies that will sell you mailing lists based on zip codes and demographic targeting so that you can go out there and do seminar marketing. Or, I know more than one advisor who started doing classes at their local community college, basically so that they could advertise it through the community college rather than having to buy a list. So it was a little bit cheaper. Some advisors I know have tried to do that around webinars. So instead of buying a mailing list, you buy ads on Facebook to try to plow it out there. And, hey, if you want advice on your financial future, we're having a webinar on it. Come and check it out. You can go down those kinds of routes, but the problem is not a lot of people really wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking, I got to get me a comprehensive financial planner. The challenge around financial planning as such is it's a really hard thing to sell. That's actually indirect. It's an incredibly valuable thing to do. People who buy it end up paying for it for a long time, which is why most advisory firms with recurring models have fantastic retention and build very successful businesses. But it's a hard thing to sell up front because it's not how most people think of their lives in terms of their pain points and what they want. And that's why we push so hard around niches, because it's one thing to go out there and say, hey, I do comprehensive financial planning. And maybe if you're a young lawyer who's about to make partner and you're kind of stressed about the deal, maybe you'd be like, oh, well, this person does comprehensive financial planning and I got some financial questions about this law firm buy-in deal and how I handle the shares and whether that impacts our tax situation. So I guess I'll call this person. But if you make a niche and your niche is I work with young lawyers making partner, and now you run a seminar with targeted advertising for young lawyers that says how young lawyers can effectively navigate the buy-in to a law firm practice, guess what the conversion rate's going to be on your prospecting, and guess how many more clients are going to come in, and guess how many more are going to engage your services, because you're connecting with a much more immediate and tangible need for them. And then once you've got that, you can take that to the young lawyers section of the local bar association. You can start going to networking meetings for young lawyers. There's probably only so many regional or sizable law firms in town, you can make a targeted list of all of them, look up their lawyers on their websites, and start doing targeted communication to them because you can find them. And that's the whole point of having a niche. Even if you want to come out of the gate hard with prospecting, the more targeted you get, the easier it is to start figuring out how to target this, right? If you go to a BNI meeting, you might even have to try for a while to find one that doesn't already have saturation with multiple financial planners and investment people and insurance agents and so forth. But if you go to the young lawyers meeting where they're talking about practice management and making partner, I'm going to bet a lot of money you will be the only financial planner there. And that's the whole point of being more specialized and being more targeted. And by the time you're doing that, you're wasting your effort. If all you do is go there and prospect at those meetings, you should be doing a much more structured marketing outreach to them as well. Can you get them on a drip marketing list? Can you start writing a blog about the tax issues that occur when you buy into a law firm practice? Can you start doing rankings of the best law firms in the area and the deals that they offer, right? There's so much more that you can do that's targeted, that takes your prospecting and amplifies it with marketing when you're into a target market. And then that's why we pound the table so hard, because when you've been doing that for 3 years, you will be the go-to person in town for lawyers that are trying to negotiate partnership and have a big income pop and could pay thousands of dollars for financial advice. And your only alternative, if you're the generic prospector, is you're going to be going to the same BNI meeting you've been going to for 3 years. 70% of it will probably have turned over because people have moved on to new things. And you'll be constantly reintroducing yourself and restarting from scratch every year when you don't have some kind of target that you're going after. And that's why we pound the table so hard on this, and why it matters so much is you can frankly prospect any direction that you want, but the more targeted you are in your prospecting, the more it's likely to work, the more you can amplify it with marketing, and the more you can build a reputation so that it may not be easier in year 1, but it gets easier in year 2 and easier in year 3, and it continues to multiply thereafter.
So in summary, niche, 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 niche. It really is. It's just the only way to really prioritize your marketing efforts. And I mean, I joke with Jen, our director of marketing here at XY, all the time that, we could spend hundreds of millions of dollars. There's an infinite amount of ways we could spend money on marketing. But what are the most effective strategies? Well, it all comes back to who are we targeting? Who are we really trying to speak to? And how do you reach them, as opposed to, just putting things out there and see what works. So we are failing miserably at moving through this. Maybe we should have just done a whole episode on prospecting versus marketing. Folks can let us know if they want to hear more about that. We will try to be a little quicker here going forward. Okay, second question. I'm curious about some of the relationship management processes that fee-only planners are using. Those that have been doing this a while. Anything from meeting frequency to how each meeting is actually structured. I'm personally used to portfolio reviews leading the discussions, and I'd love to hear about the ways people are shifting focus. I think this is just an awesome question, because this was a major struggle for me as I started my own business. Was what do you do in each meeting when investments has sort of historically been the focus? So how do you bring the focus to planning? And I'll first sort of break this apart, because Michael, you and I have talked about this several times now, that planning is sort of, it's two parts. It's the initial plan development. We'll just say whatever that looks like for your practice. It may take a week, it may take a year, but there's sort of this initial plan foundation laying. And then there's the ongoing relationship that you have with your client that is going to be, potentially a lifelong relationship. So from your experience, I guess, let's talk about initial planning process. What are you seeing from successful advisors? And I know it runs the gamut. So just sort of some examples around what is working successfully for developing the initial financial plan for a client.
So in general, I see people come at this 2 different directions. Number one are the advisors that just literally lead with comprehensive financial planning. Like, you got some investment questions? Great. We're going to do a comprehensive financial plan. And after we go through the planning process, we'll figure out, where that leads us in terms of investing your portfolio. And if you're not interested in that, then you're not interested in financial planning and you're not a good client for me. And then it gets really simple, or not simple, but like it becomes a process to screen out the people who don't want the financial planning and don't care about the financial planning and therefore are not a good fit for you if you're trying to build a business around financial planning. So option one is they come out of the gate with comprehensive financial planning. And so the classic process for most advisors I find is typically 2 to 3 meetings. Often once someone has said they want to come on board and work with you, they've made that agreement. Classically, meeting number 1 is the data gathering / discovery meeting. We're going to gather information. We're going to talk about your background and what you do, and get the financial numbers and just get all the personal stuff. I mean, what are the goals? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do with this? How can I help you get there? Meeting number 2 is sort of the plan presentation meeting. So I've taken all that information in, I've analyzed it. And either I'm coming back to you with the plan that I'm going to present, or maybe I'm coming back to you with some planning scenarios to look at, and we're going to put it up on the screen and kind of go through it together and use the software more collaboratively. So different advisors do it different ways in terms of whether they print a plan or kind of go collaboratively through the software. And then a lot of advisors, particularly if they're planning based and not necessarily product based, we'll then have some third meeting that comes, which is kind of the implementation meeting. Okay, let's start figuring out what we're going to do, or even take the first steps. Because if you come at someone with like a 15 item long action item list, most people just freak out because they can't do 15 things. So, we go through the plan presentation and we kind of figure out, like, does this align with what you want? And you say, okay, great. Next time you come in, we're going to start putting some of this to effect. Or maybe we'll give you 1 or 2 things to get started at the end of the planning meeting. And then we'll spend another round on implementation, just figuring out, okay, what are we going to do next? Okay, you got an open IRA. So where are we going to do it? Can we even open the account online while you're in the meeting? Let's get ready to do the rollover. Okay, we got to review your employee benefits. All right, can we pull that up online? Let's look at that right in the next meeting, and we'll start going through that. And they just start knocking through the implementation items, which might take 1 meeting or might take several meetings. And I note this about planners, like the planning style approach, because if you come at this from the product approach, it tends to look a little bit different. The end of the plan presentation is usually the now you buy my product. And you ask people to sign something and buy at the end of that meeting. And I remember that well, because that was how I started my career, was doing that. And, it works pretty well for building up to a sale. But if you're really trying to get people to do a long list of action items to improve their financial life, most people just can only take in and process it so quickly. And so recognizing that implementation process will take time, and even setting people up with that expectation ultimately makes them feel better, because no one wants to get fit. If you get 15 action items, you feel like you can't do them. Then you come in for a meeting, you didn't do them. Then you feel bad that you're not doing your planning. And you only show up for so many planning meetings when you're not getting your planning done, before you just feel so bad that you stop coming in for the meetings, and then your client terminates you. So you make it sort of the old, how do you eat an elephant 1 bite at a time? Setting clients up with that expectation and sort of stretching out to a realistic implementation process is both effective for clients and just literally gives you what you're going to be doing in your meetings for the next several months or even year or two, depending on how much stuff there is. And frankly, by the time you get through a year or two, something in their lives probably changed, and you're going to have more items.
Yeah, I agree that was my structure when I ran Serenity, was sort of that 3 meeting. I used to do plan implementation and investments implementation as separate meetings. Investment implementation was usually much quicker, but just as the opportunity, because then we weren't allowed to do electronic signatures on certain account openings and things like that. So I just would have clients either come in or figure out, if they were virtual, I would mail them the stuff and we'd handle it that way. And we just did a survey actually of some of our members as we sort of develop the XY Planning Network training program around how to do financial planning for young people. And what we found was that pretty much all advisors do a plan up front. Some just feel like they do more of a plan template and sort of then go through various sections throughout the first year. Others feel like they do more of a plan delivery of the big plan and then break up implementation throughout the first year or two. I'm finding that there's just a ton of similarities and commonalities there that, we've all moved away from the book plan that we deliver, which also includes 64 recommendations. And that sort of bleeds into, okay, how are we managing ongoing relationships with clients and ongoing financial planning? And I see this done in 2 primary ways. One is just in terms of frequency of meetings. most advisors I hear say they try to meet with their clients quarterly, but realistically, you're probably only going to see your clients 3 times a year. I mean, they're going to miss a meeting. It's going to take a while to get something scheduled. Quarterly may be the goal, but 2 to 4 is probably normal, maybe with 3 being the average. But what you're doing in each of those meetings, I think, sort of falls into 2 camps. You have the advisors that are sort of doing implementation as life happens. So they're saying, hey, this thing happened. We're going to meet about it. You found out you're pregnant. Great. Here are the list of things that we're going to work on. And over the next meeting, we're going to discuss this piece. And maybe the second meeting later in the year is some implementation around that piece. So it's sort of as life is happening, you're seeing what's going on in the client situation. And then what do we need to be doing to get your financial situation ready for it. So that's sort of camp 1. Camp 2 is a very structured Q1, we cover this topic. Carolyn McClanahan with Life Planning Partners out of Jacksonville is actually the one that comes to mind when I think of this, is that, Q1, I'm going to get what she does each quarter wrong, but, Q1 is insurance review and planning. And every year during the first quarter, every client gets an insurance review. And Q2 is investment review. Q3 is, we'll say, estate and retirement plan, and Q4 is tax projection review and tax planning. And just, there's also some of this, hey, life is happening, we're going to sort of squeeze it in, but every fourth quarter, everyone gets a tax projection review, which is also a way of doing it. She also has a very targeted market. The majority of her clients are doctors. And so therefore she has built that structure ideal for those advisors, for her perspective, or for her ideal clients, I can't talk, which I think is the final comment that I have on this is your meeting structure and frequency and service model will be so different than another advisor if you both have very targeted niche markets, potentially. That really the way that you design your service should be based on who you're trying to serve. And I can't tell you if 6 meetings a year or 1 meeting a year is ideal because I don't know who you're serving.
The other thing I'd add to this as well, are those little things that makes a very big difference, is having agendas, like having actual meeting agendas for every meeting. And the first thing on the agenda is not the portfolio review. It's something financial planning. And in fact, you can have several things on that agenda before you get to the planning meeting. The first is maybe your structured plan, like calendar-based planning thing, right? Like Carolyn does. So we always review tax planning at the beginning of the year. So that's the first meeting, and we always do employee benefits in the last quarter's meeting. So that's always on for the Q4 meetings. So like first on the item is whatever your structural calendar thing might be. Second is, carrying over action items that you're already working on, right? So like, let's check in on the things you were going to be doing on your financial plan and make sure that you're actually getting them done. Is there anything we can do to help, and make sure that we're working on them? Number 3 might be whatever the client wants. So one of the best practices around doing meeting agendas is not only doing them, but a couple of business days before the meeting, send the agenda to the client, say, here's what's on the agenda to talk about. Is there anything else we should cover? And give them a chance to, lo and behold, add more financial planning things to the meeting, not just asking them on the spot, because if they can't think of the thing on the spot, then you're going to be stuck talking about a portfolio review because there's nothing left to talk about. Ask them a couple of days in advance, give them a little time to mull on it. Maybe they'll reply immediately, and add that into the meeting. And so by the time you start with whatever your calendar-based planning conversation is, then whatever ongoing planning issues you're already working on to check in and make sure it's getting done, or see if there's anything else you can do. Then whatever planning issues the client added to the list. Then there might even be a fourth of like whatever planning things you were otherwise going to be working on this quarter. If the client started last year and there were 15 action items, like you've still got 7 of them left to go, you already knew there was 1 or 2 things you were going to be working on this quarter because you finished the carryover ones from last quarter. And so by the time you've gotten through all of those, which could be 3 or 5 or 7 things on the agenda, depending on how many action items there were, whatever your calendar-based planning issue was, whatever the client added to the list, then all the way down at the very bottom is, by the way, if we have time, we can also check in about your portfolio. Otherwise, I'll just give you a portfolio statement. And I know a lot of advisors that follow a structure like this. And the reality is by the time they get to the end of the list, when the portfolio review is going to come, they're already well over an hour into the meeting and the meeting's over. And like the time already got absorbed with everything else. So just having an agenda, having a structure to it where you set the planning things first and you know they're going to be first and you give a client the opportunity of advance the meeting to add more planning things. Lo and behold, you'll find you actually just don't even get to the investment conversation very much, which is fine because the whole point is to be planning centric and not investment centric.
Yep, I totally agree. The agenda setting was really hard for me just because I'm one that I enjoy having conversations on the fly and just sort of seeing how they go.
Really?
Obviously, by the structure.
I've never noticed that about
by the structure of this podcast. But yeah,
for anybody who doesn't know, Alan takes that preferred style and inflicts it upon me. So I don't know any of the questions coming in the mailbag because he likes handling things spontaneously.
It's true. And even the podcast, none of these are scripted, right? And this is just my preferred method. But I have found that some folks get really stressed out when I say, like, just show up and we'll have a conversation. Like, no, I need to prepare. I need to know what to talk about. And I'm thinking, like, why? We're just going to have a conversation, right? But that's just their personality and the way they're wired. And our clients are the same way. Your clients may prefer to really know what's going to be happening in the meeting before they get there. And so you can give them a heads up. So, all right, we will move on to the next question. Again, we'll try to be speedy. What are some study materials you would suggest for someone coming into the business? Can you learn your way to becoming a true financial advisor, or does it have to be through experience or just a healthy mix of both? The question I'm wondering is there a way to get into this field if I don't have the resources such as a fee-only advisor near me to show me the ropes? Again, great question, because we talk a lot about, getting into financial planning and find a mentor, find an advisor nearby, get some job experience, that sort of thing. But, that some folks either don't have an advisor near them. You and I sometimes disagree on, is bad experience better than no experience, and what that means for future advisors. But I guess let's, again, try to break it down, just because I think we could go so many different directions with this. How are you going to become a financial planner? I would put this into sort of 3 buckets. The soft side skills of how to be an actual financial planner and communicate and be a behavioral change artist with your clients. There's technical, how to literally do financial planning. And we could probably switch those. Just, what's the core of doing planning? How do you help your clients implement the plan? And then all the other stuff, how to run your business and all the other components that come with, if you're actually going to go out and start a business, start your own RIA that you need to know. So on the technical side, I think you and I can both agree that this starts with CFP program. If you're not a CFP yet and you're getting into financial planning and you will learn how to do financial planning, sign up for a CFP certification program or an online degree program through one of the various major universities out there. And then I'll put in a plug for Nerd's Eye View. Go to kitces.com and start reading. It will numb you at times, but it's information that you need to know, and you need to know where it is whenever you need it. Any other recommendations on the technical side of learning how to be a financial planner that are important?
You can look a little bit on the book side of things. CFP Board actually has created this like giant grand tome that they call the Financial Planning Competency Handbook. And it's just a big giant book of like all the technical knowledge, all the core content areas, just this like ream of stuff you need to know and knowledge you need to be able to apply. I know some people that kind of use it as an ongoing reference book, something to go back to. I mean, it's literally, I think it's close to 1,000 pages. It's very textbook style. Some people, I think some CFP programs actually use it as a textbook in their learning program. Some people use it as a study guide. I think they even give you like practice test questions that you can use to build up for the CFP exam. But you can look for some book information like that on the technicals just to support the learning process and the planning and what you need to know so that you hopefully give some technically accurate financial advice.
Yeah, we'll call that part the science of financial planning. And as any experienced financial planner will tell you, the science is pretty useless without the art. So the best laid financial plan is useless if you can't communicate the value of planning to your clients and the value of implementation, and then help your clients actually implement the financial plan. So that sort of bleeds into the soft skills side. I've never been through the program. I did NAPFA's version, which they did for 1 year, but I hear rave reviews about is FPA residency. It's not cheap, but it is a full week program on basically how to be a comprehensive financial planner, where they bring in something like 8 very experienced advisors that have been doing this for several decades. And if you ever look at the list of, they call them the deans are sort of the ones who created comprehensive financial planning. So just a really cool group of advisors to learn from. It's a very intensive week, but my understanding is that is just a wonderful way to really see what real financial planning is and the value of and how to communicate that.
I'd first of all certainly put in a plug for FPA residency as well. And worth noting, for the 1 week residency class that you spend on site, you get credit for 3 months of CFP experience.
Which just shows how much the CFP program thinks of this program. They wouldn't give you 3 months of experience for a crappy week of education.
Yeah, it really is an intensive, you practice financial planning. In fact, because the whole point is doing soft skills, sort of the essence of residency is you're going to go out with 20 or 30 something other financial planners. You get broken up into small groups. You will create and deliver a financial plan for a hypothetical scenario where the deans basically role play with you, the client, and give you the information so that you can prepare and deliver a financial plan. And you are not allowed to use software or a calculator.
Oh, wait, I did not know about the no software part.
So you will communicate and use the soft skills to communicate financial planning. You can get giant slabs of white paper and you can draw by hand any visuals you want to support the process, right? Because the whole point here is not, hey, I want to figure out whether you're going to have, $1.2 million in 27 years or $1.4 million because you need 1.4 to retire and 1.2 isn't enough. The whole point is to get away from just that numbers analysis and into the more substantive conversations, the real conversations with their goals and what they're working towards and what else do they want to know besides your ability to do some math for them.
Absolutely. So, and then sort of flipping into books. I mean, this is actually an area where there's a lot more books because you can go outside of the industry to find books on communication and soft skills. But I'm thinking pretty much anything written by Rick Kaler. George Kinder is a rock star in life planning.
Yeah, George Kinder's lighting the torch or 7 stages of money maturity.
Yeah, and then for Rick Kaler, it would be Financial Wisdom of Ebenezer Scrooge, and I think his Facilitating Financial Health is also a really cool book. I just heard my major professor, Dr. Joseph Getz from UGA, and Dr. Grable just released a book about communication. The name is escaping me, so I have not read it, but I did hear one advisor said they had read it. It was really great. We'll link to all these in the show notes. Anything from the folks at Money Quotient or from Mitch Anthony. I mean, the true life planning folks in our industry.
There are even some books that have been around for a while that I'll plug that at least get you to think about this much more from the soft side than the technical side. The Excellent Investment Advisor by Nick Murray. For a lot of advisors who started 10 and 20 years ago, that was kind of the Bible of how to talk effectively to clients, where it was all about the soft skills of investment conversation and not the hard skills of not the technical skills of investment conversation. Values-Based Financial Planning by Bill Bachrach is also an interesting one about getting people to just thinking more about financial planning from the perspective of what are the client's values and what are we trying to teach them to do. Frankly, no offense intended to Bill, it was a more revolutionary book for its time when it was published than now, I think, where we've accepted much more that you kind of need to inspire people to be pursuing their values if you really want them to follow through on this and not just try to beat them up with a bunch of technical stuff. But the book is, I think, almost 20 years old. It was very groundbreaking at the time, and I think is still good perspective on just thinking about financial planning from a values-based perspective and how do you start trying to have those conversations with clients.
Yeah, and then the sort of final educational piece that I can think of would be Kansas State now has a certification, a graduate level certificate in financial therapy. And I was actually talking with one of their lead professors at a conference recently and learned that it was much more about instituting behavioral change than like how to do therapy. Financial therapy is sort of a scary word. Like, I don't want to be a therapist. I'm a financial planner. But as a financial planner, the real crucial part of what we do is behavioral modification. And it really is implementation, especially if you work with younger clients, which this is a whole other tangent that we could go down. But, when you're used to working with baby boomers that are already financially healthy, you're not helping them with the skills of financial independence. When you work with younger people, you really are working on a lot of skill set that, in order to be financially successful, which again comes with behavioral change, behavioral modification. And even a program like that may be ideal, and you don't have to be enrolled at Kansas State to get that certificate. You can just be an an outsider coming in and taking it, and it's all done virtually. So sort of another piece. And then finally, I guess the final piece is, you can be a great financial planner, but if you really suck at running your business or attracting new clients or closing new prospects, you're not going to have much of a business. So if you are looking to go out on your own, then that's a whole other area of study, which, there is even more information out there around how to successfully run a business. Some of my favorites, I love like the 4-Hour Work Week, mainly keeping you focused on building the type of business that you actually want to build. And from Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, I'll also highly recommend the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which is very, very powerful around, do you want to be a financial planner or do you want to build a financial planning business? Because they're not the same thing. Both are reasonable answers, but make sure you know which one you're trying to build, because the challenge and kind of the nature of the name, the E-Myth, is the entrepreneur myth. And one of the key points of the book is that a lot of people sort of say they want to be entrepreneurs and build businesses, but they don't actually want to build businesses. Like, they don't want to build a financial planning business. They simply want to be a financial planner. And that's okay. And you might even do it as a quote unquote business owner because you want to be your own boss and do that. And actually, we have many members of XYPN that's specifically what they're trying to do. But know whether you're trying to build a business or a practice, whether you want to be a financial planning business owner or a financial planner, because the more they grow over time, the more different they are.
Totally agree. All right. So question number 4, this one should be a little bit quicker because it is, what's the best CRM? Which is a great question with no context. I'll give my sort of quick and dirty answer just because this is a question that I get a lot from advisors, and feel free to weigh in. So if you look at any industry study that asks what CRM you use, the number one selected choice is Outlook. So we can start by saying Outlook is not a CRM. So we're going to take it out of the mix. You're sort of left with the industry standards are, for newer firms, Redtail and Wealthbox, sort of your lower, I won't say lower end, your lower cost per user average for your smaller firms. As you grow, Juncture, maybe like Tamarack, which I think overlays Microsoft Dynamics, which is Microsoft Dynamics sort of the foundation. Tamarack built a custom overlay, is pretty popular. Are there any more in that sort of mid-tier I'm missing?
That's really, at least in terms of independence, that's really kind of the core in the mid-tier. And even in practice, I find Tamarack CRM tends to be more to mid to large size firms, not a lot of smaller firms that are there. The same is true for Salesforce, which historically had some pretty good penetration in advisory firms, but increasingly has been the domain of mid to large size firms and not necessarily small ones.
Yeah, that would sort of be my final. It's like Salesforce is really for your larger firms. If you look at, and we've had some firms on this show like Abacus Wealth Partners, when you're managing almost $2 billion, you can afford Salesforce. If you're just starting out or you're mid-size, I wouldn't even be looking at it. So it's just too expensive and too highly customizable, which means that it doesn't actually do anything well until you pay a lot of money to customize it. So for newer firms, there are some other services and Salesforce overlays and things like that. But again, I think the two most popular right now, Wealthbox and Redtail, from what I can tell, and this is ever evolving. So please, Redtail and Wealthbox, don't email me and complain for me saying this, because I know it will change and my information may be old. But Redtail seems to be better on the workflow task management side as of today. Wealthbox tends to be easier to use, a little simpler user interface, really great for hooking with your email system and sort of contact management, client management, that sort of thing.
Strong use of integrations to and APIs, so you can plug it into Zapier a lot more than most other CRMs.
Yeah. So, but the truth is, you're not going to go wrong with either of those two. Where you will go wrong is if you don't get a CRM. But I'm a big fan of, even right as you're starting out, go ahead and spend the money to get a CRM. One, you need a place to manage all your contact information and your client information. You need to be able to manage your workflows and your tasks and your projects. And you also need a place to take notes so that when the auditor shows up or the regulator shows up and says, you made these recommendations, explain to me why you did, you can pull up your notes and remember, because while you think you will remember everything that you said in that meeting, you will probably not remember that you even had the meeting in about 3 months. So you definitely need a place to be storing notes and documentation and client forums and all of that sort of thing.
And it's worth noting there's kind of two layers, two aspects that go with kind of why you need the CRM. Oh, I guess there's really three. So number one, as Alan said, there's actually a compliance component to this of just making sure you're actually documenting meetings and what's happening so that you can validate to an auditor later what you talked about. The second is just for keeping track of your own stuff. What did you say to who, and what did you meet about, and what did you talk about? And it's not just so you can validate to an auditor. It's because once you've got more than a dozen or two clients, as the business grows, you are not going to remember all the things that you said you were going to do for all the different people. It feels easy with the first client or two, because when you only got a client or two, you can remember everything to do for them because there's no one else you're doing things for yet. But you'll move that past that point pretty quickly. And if you go back and try to start reconstructing your CRM process after you have a bunch of clients, guess what? It's a real pain in the butt because you don't have the time then because you're getting clients. So do it, set the groundwork now as you're getting your first few clients, and then you'll already have the good habits and the structure in place, and you won't have to go and reconstruct things when you have less time. And the third reason why ultimately it really, really matters to have CRM, if you have any hopes of growing beyond just literally being a solo with no one who helps you, the moment you have a staff member, even if it's an admin assistant or a paraplanner, even if they're working part-time, the moment you've got other people that might need to interact on a client situation and it doesn't work just to have all the stuff in your head, your business is in serious trouble if you don't have a centralized CRM so that everybody has a common place to go to understand who's working on what and who's touching what for any particular client.
Just getting caught up to speed. It's amazing what you can learn from meeting notes over the years just by going back and reading those. That's how I always used to get caught up on a new client when I was at a new firm. But all right, so next question. And I have to admit, I kind of cheated on this one. I'll tell you why here in a second, or how I cheated. But first, the question. As a brand new firm, when do you need to get E&O insurance or errors and omissions insurance? For instance, should you get it when you take on your first client? If you get it later on, will it disqualify any work or clients you have done work for before you got the insurance? And then any experience with claims of E&O insurance? So the way I cheated was, again, we were recently at the NAPA conference and I grabbed our friend Darren from Markel Cambridge, or Markel Investment Advisors, as they're sort of moving their brand to, and actually asked him a piece of this. And he said,
Markel is a E&O insurer.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that. They're actually the ones that power and underwrite the E&O insurance policy for XYPN Network members that we have. So I ran this by him and double checked that I'm not going to get too much into how the claims actually work. We could bring them on to talk for an hour about that. But when should you get E&O insurance? And I said, when you get your first client. And Darren said, you really need it before you make your first recommendation. Because the moment you make a recommendation is the moment you open yourself up to professional liability. And maybe we should even take a step back on what in the world does E&O even cover. It's really intended to be there when you make an error or you make an omission, as the title suggests, that when you make a mistake and a client sues you because you made a mistake or you made a recommendation that went sideways, you recommended, hey, based on your life situation, I really don't think you need disability insurance. And then the next month that client becomes disabled, they can sue you for making a bad recommendation. Or you have something in your notes that you never actually told a client, or you make a trading error. Now, some E&O policies don't cover trading errors, but a lot of them do, so you can check that. But if you, accidentally, sold fund A and you meant to sell fund B and it caused a tax situation for your client, and now you've got to cover that for a client. Or if you're hacked. So data breach is another area of E&O insurance that's becoming very popular. Coverage is, if you get hacked and someone steals your client's money or they steal money from you in some way, sort of data breach is also an issue with, stealing client information, that sort of thing. It really does cover all the workings of the business itself and coverage for that.
And the nature of it, I mean, as the name says, it's errors and omissions. So basically, errors are things you do that was wrong. Omissions are things you missed that were wrong, right? So like you can do something wrong by doing, you can make a mistake by doing something wrong. You can make a mistake by failing to do something right. So the errors catch the things you did wrong, and the omissions part catches the things that you missed doing right.
If you purposefully do the wrong thing, that's called fraud, and this does not cover it.
Yes. Yes. So be careful about intentionally stealing. That's not what this is meant to cover. But yeah, I mean, as Alan said, as the Markel folks said, realistically, like, you want something in place when you're going to actually make a recommendation to someone that could be wrong. Hopefully it won't be. Hopefully it will never be. But the moment you're engaged and you give someone a recommendation, then they paid you and you gave a recommendation. So you are legally engaged as a advisor. So this isn't necessarily about giving someone like a free tip, but at the point you're actually engaged with a contract as an advisor and you make a recommendation, your liability exposure is now on the table. And from a practical perspective, that means you really have to start the process a couple of weeks before. Like, E&O underwriting is not hugely intensive, but it's not quite a like, oh, my client meeting's at 2, so at 1 I'm going to go online and buy me some insurance really fast before I go and have the client meeting. It does take realistically a couple of weeks just to get signed up and make sure everything's in good place. So, when you've got the first client coming on board and you're going to start scheduling some meetings with them is probably when you need to be getting ready with your E&O coverage if you haven't already.
Yeah, and the second part of this question was, if you get it later on, so you wait after a year, you get E&O insurance, will it disqualify any work or clients that you've worked with prior to getting the insurance? And that depends. So some insurance will cover previously done work for existing clients. It is something that they're going to look at very closely. And it really depends on your firm structure and the way that you operate and that sort of thing. Or it may just flat out disqualify all work done prior to getting the insurance as sort of like pre-existing condition coverage or not with health insurance that, obviously now you have to cover pre-existing conditions, but previously they could say, no, we're not going to cover anything that's happened in the past, or we will cover anything that happened in the past after you've had this policy for a year or two, just to be sure you're not literally about to be sued and you're getting insurance to cover that. The adverse effect there is they're trying to cover that. But or they may be able to go back and say, okay, yeah, we'll cover it just because you're new enough or have few enough clients. So it really depends on the insurance itself and just that policy. Each policy is different. And then finally, there's a question here about experience. Do we have any experience with claims on E&O and how that worked and how that got settled? Have you ever had an E&O insurance claim that you had to deal with?
Thankfully, no. We've never had to actually go through a claims process. We have had one or two mistakes that have come up over the years, just there's enough advisors and enough size to the firm, but frankly, never anything that was large enough that was a claim. They were all things that just made a small mistake, absorbed the consequences, made a payment to resolve the issue with the clients. Things like the one that comes up most commonly that I'll admit we've had one or two over the years are those scenarios like, crap, made a mistake, sold the wrong investment, triggered a tax gain because we, didn't file the lot properly, or something got miscommunicated between the advisor and the trading team. And either, we unwittingly caused a tax impact, or we had to reverse something. But when you reverse it, if the prices moved a couple of cents, then maybe there's a small financial differential that has to get made up. So, they weren't huge things. Fortunately, at least we have enough. You had enough process even then to catch it quickly. Now we have enough process in place that hasn't happened for many, many years, but nothing to the point where we had to actually file a full-on claim. We at least managed to keep the financial consequences very, very small.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I've never had to deal with a claim, but I guess the piece I can tell you about this is that, RIA E&O insurance reminds me a little bit of auto insurance, where you can pay a little bit more and get one of the established bigger players that has been around for a couple of decades, or you can get a nice discount by working with a new company no one's ever heard of. And based on the way I'm framing that, I'm sure you can guess which way I'm going to push you to go. And that is that, one, ask your E&O provider how many claims they've actually had to deal with and they've actually had filed, because one, that might speak a little bit to, one, their experience in dealing with claims, and two, their financial viability. I can issue a new policy with super low premiums because I've never actually had to pay out. Once you actually have to start paying out, that's when sort of the time comes and you've got to be sure that you're financially viable as a company. So just sort of see, talk to your provider around how long have they been doing RIA, E&O insurance? How many claims have they filed? What is their claims process? Some providers are going to be much more involved than others.
Do they sub it out? Do they have a reinsurance agreement?
And, what's the financial viability of the company? And you can look all that up online, but, where do they stand in terms of capitalization and, their rating? I guess it'd be Moody's that would rank. Is that right?
Yeah. If it's an insurer that large, yeah, that's covered.
And just be sure having really crappy E&O insurance is not a whole lot better than not having it at all. So if the difference is paying, $80 a month for a crappy policy or $110 for a good one, like go ahead and pay the $110 for a company that's recognizable and has been doing this a while, because that will change the answer to the question around claims experience will be very different if you're working with one of the bigger, more established, experienced players versus a newer one.
And frankly, the other thing that I think is worth noting in this regard is that you really need to be careful if you're shopping coverage. There are a lot of groups out there that do affinity discounts for E&O coverage. I mean, we effectively have a version even through XY Planning Network where, we negotiated favorable terms and appealing rates for our members and, use the bulk buying power of having 400 plus members to do it. But the challenge, and I don't want to pick on any groups in particular, so I won't name them by name, but there are particularly some association groups that do affinity insurance deals as well. And the problem with a lot of the ones through the association groups, so, for XY Planning Network, we know exactly who our members are, and we actually view this as a core value. And so, we negotiated a lot of, frankly, favorable terms that you won't see in other E&O policies. So, our coverage is by the firm and not by the person. So if you hire a parent planner, you don't have to double your E&O costs for a second person because the firm isn't bigger. The person is just assisting you. And we do our E&O coverage by revenue of the firm, not AUM, since obviously a lot of members don't do assets, so it's not a good fit. The challenge that comes up with some association style, policies is in their effort just to get something in place and to make it look cheap and appealing, often the actual provisions of the policy are much more limited. Things like they do exclude prior acts and they will only include things that happen with new clients after come on board. Crops up in a lot of those policies. Many of them have larger deductibles. Many of them will have things that are excluded that you may not even realize if you didn't ask. Things like data breach is very common. Larger deductibles for trading errors are out there. I mean, I've even seen ones that have, are offered to thousands and thousands of people and have things like $20 million or $25 million aggregate coverage limits, which basically means if a few dozen of those thousands of advisors have a claim, the policy will be maxed out that year and your claim will be zero if you come after theirs. And it's not uncommon at all for group policies to have aggregate limits, but some of them have astonishingly low aggregate limits for incredibly large numbers of advisors. Our version, XY Planning Network, has one as well because, again, they're common in group policies, but we do a lot to figure out what's a reasonable amount given the number of members and the kinds of businesses that they conduct and what realistically would be claims exposure, because we don't want to ever actually hit that aggregate limit, but we do get a break on the rates to have something there. So we try to negotiate something reasonable. But there are some group policies out there with huge numbers of participants and incredibly low aggregate claims numbers as well, which means, you run the worst of both worlds. You get a high deductible policy with a low aggregate limit. It means it won't pay anything unless you have a really big claim. And if you have a really big claim, it might not pay anything if someone else capped it first.
Yeah, and listeners can let me know either by email or in the VIP group if you would like for us to have, an E&O insurance expert to come on and explain the differences and nuances between individual and group policies and all that sort of thing. Happy to have someone on. Just let us know if that is a topic that you would want covered. So we successfully not only failed to get through 5 questions, we actually only got to 4. So we went below average, I think, which is great. But some awesome questions. Thank you, everybody that submitted. We have a list here of a few more. So once Michael and I can get off the road from our never-ending May travel schedule, we'll circle back and do another mailbag episode. But we love these questions. These are the most fun for me just because it's nice to hear questions from actual listeners instead of us just trying to think up, do they want to hear from a insurance policy guru, or does that sound boring? And so it's nice when y'all can just ask the questions and we can answer them. Always feel free to jump into our VIP group. That's actually where all of these questions came from. So xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP, and you can join there. Ask us questions, because we usually post in there a week before we're going to record to say, hey, give us your questions, or you're always welcome to shoot me an email and I'll mark it down in the list. So Michael, thanks again for taking the time on the weekend to do the mailbag episode, and best of luck with upcoming travel dates.
Absolutely. Thank you. Glad we finally got a little time to catch up on a mailbag. And I guess we'll have to make sure we do one sooner than later, because now we have not only the new mailbag questions that come in, but the stuffed full bag that we barely got through this time, since we didn't even hit the average of 5 questions.
That concludes today's podcast, and I'd like to again thank our partner, FMX. Remember that over 70% of clients say content marketing makes them feel closer to their advisor. You can learn more about their content as a service and how FMX helps financial advisors connect with clients and increase sales by visiting www.fmexdirect.com. Remember, clients want to receive personalized content from their financial advisors, and FMX can help. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitces, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.